It was a quiet Tuesday night when my phone lit up on the counter. A message from Mom. "Don't call or come over. We're done. And don't even think about the will, sweetie." I froze. The air felt heavier, the tea in my cup went cold. No explanation, no warning, just a clean cut like she'd rehearsed it. I typed 2 words back. "Got it." Then took a slow sip of my tea, tasting the bitterness spreading across my tongue. By midnight, my phone was blowing up with missed calls and messages, and that's when everything began to crumble. People always said my family looked picture-perfect: Dad in his crisp shirts, Mom's pearls catching the Sunday light, my brother Brandon laughing loud enough to fill the whole diner. From the outside, we were the American dream family of Tulsa. But every dream looks perfect until you see the cracks under the paint. Dad Stephen Hayes built his empire one greasy kitchen at a time. The man could turn a broken-down diner into a full restaurant by sheer willpower and pride. He was the kind of father who believed respect was earned by obedience, not love. "The restaurants are our legacy," he used to say, pointing a fork at me over dinner. "You'll learn the business, Susan." I never wanted the business. I wanted light color and space, not the smell of frying oil. I wanted to design to build something that felt alive. When I told him I'd been accepted into an art school in Chicago, he laughed like I'd just told him a joke. "If you walk away from this family's work," he said, "you walk away from our support." He meant it. I paid my own tuition, juggling 2 jobs and student loans, while Brandon got a brand new car at 16 for helping out at the diner. Mom never stepped in. She'd pour another glass of wine, smile tight, and whisper, "He's just hard on you because he sees your potential." But I knew better. She saw what I saw. Brandon was the golden boy, the one they'd already crowned heir. Years passed. I built my design firm from a 1-bedroom apartment. Word spread fast. By 30, I was redesigning boutique hotels and luxury restaurants across Oklahoma. But at every family dinner, it was still about Brandon, his new project, his big ideas, my work. "Cute, Dad," would say, barely looking up. When Mom got sick 5 years ago, I didn't hesitate. I paid for her treatments, her travel, every bill. When Brandon's new business venture failed, I wired $30,000 to clear his debts. When Dad's restaurant needed new equipment, I covered it. They always said, "Thank you, the polite, empty kind." Then came the next favor. Looking back, I think I kept doing it because I hoped one day they'd see me not as the outsider, not as the backup plan, but as family. Turns out family wasn't the problem. Their definition of it was. And the night my mother sent that text, I finally understood how deep that truth went. It started with a family meeting that felt more like a courtroom. Dad called it a discussion about the future. I should have known that meant Brandon's future, not mine. They gathered around the long dining table, the one lined with framed photos of Brandon holding trophies and ribbon cuttings from Dad's restaurants. I stood at the end, laptop open, ready to present my proposal, a sustainable design firm that could partner with hotels and restaurants across the state. Eco-friendly materials, long-term savings, a real plan, not a dream. I spoke for maybe 5 minutes before Dad interrupted. "You think hotels care about recycled wood?" he said, voice flat but sharp enough to slice. "They want cheap, not fancy experiments." Brandon chuckled without looking up from his phone. "Yeah, why don't you stick to decorating houses, sis?" Mom stood by the counter, pretending to rearrange napkins, avoiding my eyes. My hands trembled under the table. "It's not decoration," I said quietly. "It's design. It saves money, and it's the future." Dad leaned back, arms crossed. "We're not throwing money away on your pipe dream. Brandon's opening a new location that's our priority." Something inside me cracked. Years of sacrifice, the bills I'd paid, the nights I stayed awake worrying about Mom's treatments, all of it meant nothing. "Mom," I said, turning to her, "you've seen my work. You know this could work." She hesitated, eyes darting toward Dad. "It just sounds risky, Susan. You know how the restaurant business is." Her words landed harder than his insults. Risky. That was the same thing he'd said when I wanted to go to college. Then out of nowhere, Tara, Brandon's wife, spoke. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the tension. "I think it's innovative," she said. "Sustainability is a big deal now." Brandon shot her a look that could have frozen fire. She shrank back into silence. Dad waved a hand, dismissive. "Enough. Meeting over." As I packed up my laptop, I caught Tara's eyes. She mouthed something that stopped me cold. "I need to tell you something." Later that night, she found me in the driveway. Her voice shook. "Brandon's been taking money from the restaurant's thousands. He's hiding it." My heart pounded. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I found the records. He's been lying to your parents for years." Before I could respond, Dad's voice carried from inside. "We need to finalize the will. Brandon's the only one keeping this family together." Mom murmured something too soft to hear. Then Dad again, firm and final. "Susan's off doing her own thing. She doesn't care about us." And right there in the dark of my parents' driveway, I realized how wrong I'd been. The betrayal wasn't coming. It had already happened. The next morning, my phone buzzed before sunrise. A new message from Mom. "Don't call or come over. We're done. And don't even think about the will, sweetie." I read it twice, then a third time. The words blurred like they were underwater. For years, I'd been the one wiring money for medical bills, Brandon's debts, and restaurant equipment. And now, with one message, I'd been erased. I sat on the edge of my bed, the city still half asleep outside my window. My chest felt hollow, not broken, just emptied. The kind of silence that comes after you've already run out of tears. I typed back 2 words. "Got it." No period. No explanation. Just 2 words. Then I set the phone down and walked to the kitchen. The tea kettle hissed softly. I poured the tea, the steam curling against the dim morning light. I lifted the cup, took a slow sip, and for the first time in years, the quiet didn't scare me. It felt like control. I opened my laptop. My banking app blinked awake. One by one, I canceled everything. Mom's hospital payments gone. Restaurant supply bills canceled. Brandon's loans stopped cold. Each click echoed in the apartment like a door closing. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I just felt lighter. For the first time, my money wasn't feeding their silence. It was buying my freedom. By noon, my phone started ringing. Mom first, then Dad, then Brandon. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not because I was angry, because I finally understood how much power I'd given them. The screen lit up again. Another call, then another. By evening, there were 20 missed calls, 5 voicemails, and a string of texts. "You're tearing the family apart. How could you do this to your mother? You'll regret this, Susan." I didn't reply. I just turned the phone face down. When the clock hit midnight, it started again, a storm of notifications, buzzing and flashing like fireworks. And as I sat there, tea cooling beside me, I realized something simple and brutal. They didn't want me. They wanted the help. The version of me that never said no, that paid the bills and kept the lights on. That version of me was gone. I looked out the window, the city glowing gold in the distance. Somewhere a car alarm wailed, then fell quiet. "I'm done," I whispered, not to them but to myself. And for the first time, I actually believed it. By morning, the storm hadn't passed, it had only changed shape. 37 missed calls, 11 voicemails, dozens of texts stacked like threats waiting to be opened. I made breakfast like nothing happened. The smell of toast filled my apartment while the phone kept lighting up beside the sink. I didn't pick it up until one voicemail from Dad appeared with the word urgent. I hit play. His voice came through sharp, commanding. "You need to fix this, Susan. The restaurants can't survive without your help. You owe us that much." Oh. The word hit me like an insult. I'd covered hundreds of thousands over the years, my savings, my work, my time, and now it was a debt. Another voicemail. Brandon this time. "You think you can just walk away? You're selfish. You're leaving Mom in tears." Then Mom's voice, soft, trembling. "Please, Susan, don't do this to me. After everything we've been through." I pressed my palms against the counter, the cool marble grounding me. They weren't reaching out for forgiveness. They were reaching out for control. By noon, Tara called. Her voice was low, urgent. "They know I told you about the money," she said. "Brandon's furious. He's trying to spin it like you made it up." "Don't worry," I told her. "I'm done explaining myself." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window phone, glowing beside me, unread messages piling up. I should have blocked them. Instead, I watched them come in, each one a reminder of how desperate they were without my support. By the end of the week, I agreed to meet them, not to reconcile, just to end it properly. The cafe was one of the few places in Tulsa where no one knew our family. The air smelled like roasted beans and rain. They were already there when I walked in, Dad arms crossed. Mom pale but composed. Brandon fidgeting with his phone. Tara wasn't there. Dad didn't waste a second. You've caused a disaster, Susan. The bills are overdue. Vendors are threatening to sue. I set my bag on the chair, my voice calm. That's not my problem anymore. Brandon leaned forward, sneering. You think you're better than us now, don't you? Just because you play with paint and fancy furniture? I met his stare. Design, Brandon. The word you're looking for is design. He laughed, shaking his head. You've always been dramatic. You love attention, I cut him off. You stole from the restaurants. The words stopped him cold. Dad's brow furrowed. What are you talking about? Tara told me everything I said. The hidden accounts, the money that vanished. Brandon's jaw tightened. She's lying. She found the records. I replied, my tone flat. And you know it. Dad turned to him, eyes narrowing. Is that true? Brandon stood abruptly. You believe her over me. She's been jealous since high school enough. I said quietly. This isn't about jealousy. It's about respect and honesty. Two things I never got from this family. Mom's voice trembled. Susan, don't do this. We can talk. I looked at her. We're past talking, Mom. You made that clear when you sent the text. The color drained from her face. I didn't mean it like that. You wrote, don't call or come over, we're done. And don't even think about the will, sweetie. I quoted every word, my voice steady. You meant it exactly like that. The cafe had gone quiet. Even the barista paused mid-motion. Dad cleared his throat. You've always been too sensitive. I smiled faintly. And you've always mistaken cruelty for discipline. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. I reached into my bag, pulled out a neatly folded folder and placed it on the table. I sold my sustainable design project, I said. A national firm bought it for $1 million. They all stared at me. I built that without your help, I continued. No loans, no family money. Just me. Brandon's mouth twisted. Good for you. Want a medal? No, I said. I just want you to understand that I don't need this family anymore. And you don't get to call me when things fall apart. Dad's jaw clenched. You think that money makes you powerful? I leaned forward slightly. No. Walking away does. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Mom finally spoke, tears welling in her eyes. We're still your family. Family doesn't use you like an ATM, I said softly. Family doesn't write you off when you stop paying. Brandon slammed his fist on the table. You're pathetic. You think you can just cut us out? I met his anger with calm. Funny. That's exactly what you did to me. He opened his mouth again, but I stood before he could speak. I'm not your safety net anymore, I said. Not your backup plan, not your excuse. Dad's voice rose. You'll regret this, Susan. I turned one hand on the chair. Maybe. But at least I'll regret it on my own terms. As I walked toward the door, I heard Mom whisper behind me, Please, Susan, don't do this. But I didn't look back. The door chimed softly as it closed behind me. The air outside was cool, the sun low on the horizon, painting the street gold. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, but I ignored it. When I reached my car, I finally let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Through the cafe window, I could still see them, 3 silhouettes arguing among themselves, their voices muted by glass. I wasn't part of that noise anymore. I took out my phone, scrolled through the messages, and pressed delete all. The screen went blank. Quiet, clean. I started the engine, the radio humming softly. For the first time, I wasn't driving away from them. I was driving toward myself. A year later, I heard the news through mutual friends, not from them. The Hayes restaurants were gone. The family legacy Dad guarded like a crown had crumbled under debt and lawsuits. Vendors sued after discovering Brandon's hidden accounts. Dad tried to fight it, but the numbers didn't lie. Brandon's name appeared in the local paper next to words like fraud and embezzlement. Tara left him quietly moving to Dallas with their daughter. Mom and Dad sold their house and moved into a smaller place outside Tulsa. I didn't feel joy when I heard it. Just a strange, heavy calm, the kind that comes after a storm has taken everything down and left the air clean. My firm had grown. I opened a second office in New York, traveling between cities, designing hotels that carried my name on brass plaques. Every now and then, I'd find myself in a lobby I'd created, warm lights, clean lines, quiet music, and I'd think, this is what home feels like when you build it yourself. One afternoon, sitting by the window of a cafe in Manhattan, I ordered the same kind of tea I'd had that night. The steam curled into the sunlight just like before. A notification blinked on my phone, an unknown number from Tulsa. I let it ring out, the sound fading beneath the soft jazz playing overhead. I smiled, lifted my cup, and took a slow sip. The tea was still bitter, but now I understood why it wasn't the drink. It was the lesson. Peace didn't come from fixing them. It came from letting them fall. People ask me sometimes if I miss them. The truth, I miss the version of them I kept hoping existed, the one that might have loved me without conditions, without a price tag attached. But that version never lived outside my imagination. Now, when I think of family, I think of peace, the kind that doesn't demand or drain. I think of mornings where no one calls to ask for help, and the quiet means safety, not punishment. Family isn't blood, it's respect. And silence, when it's chosen, can be the loudest form of freedom. If you've ever had to draw a line between love and survival, tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. And hit subscribe, because the next story might remind you that walking away isn't weakness, it's winning.
My name is Isabella Reed, and I'm 28 years old. If you'd met me a few years ago, you'd probably call me the reliable one. The kind of woman who keeps her calendar color-coded, pays her rent before the deadline, and remembers to water her plants. I never thought of that as dull. To me, stability was a kind of quiet strength. And for a while, I thought my boyfriend William understood that. When we first met, William felt like sunlight, warm, reckless, a little blinding. He was spontaneous, charming, the kind of man who could make a coffee run sound like an adventure. I was drawn to that energy. He said I balanced him out. "You're my calm in the chaos," he'd tell me, kissing my forehead before running off to some last-minute concert or trip. At first, we were perfect opposites. I'd stay up late helping him plan his projects, and he'd make me laugh when I got too serious about work. We were building something together, or at least I thought we were. But as months passed, that spark that once drew us together started to burn me. William loved attention, parties, nightlife, posting every meal online. I loved quiet evenings, slow Sundays, simple things. It wasn't that I didn't enjoy fun. I just didn't need an audience to feel alive. He started teasing me about it. "Come on, Izzy, live a little," he'd say. Then laugh when I reminded him I preferred my full name, not a nickname. "You're too proper for your own good," he'd add with that half smile that made me feel like a museum piece instead of a partner. At first I brushed it off, but the comments sharpened over time. One night, after I turned down another last-minute party because I had an early shift the next morning, he sighed dramatically. "You know what your problem is. You act like you're 40. You're not a real woman if all you do is work and stay home." The words hit harder than he realized. A real woman. What did that even mean to him? Someone who drank until sunrise and flirted for sport. I remember standing there frozen with his voice echoing in the kitchen. My hands trembled as I placed my cup on the counter. "If that's what you think a real woman is," I said quietly, "then maybe you should find a different kind." He laughed it off like it was a joke, but something in me shifted that night. From then on, everything felt off balance. When I cooked his favorite meal, he'd barely look up from his phone. When I suggested a movie night, he'd roll his eyes and call me a grandma. He wanted excitement, I wanted connection. He wanted stories to tell, I wanted a future to build. Still, I kept trying. Planning small surprises, saving up for a weekend trip, learning to like the places he loved. But nothing was enough. He wanted constant novelty, and I couldn't compete with chaos. The worst part wasn't the arguing, it was how familiar his indifference became. I'd walk into the apartment and feel like a stranger in my own home. Then came that Friday. I got off work early, hoping to make things better. I stopped by his favorite Thai place, bought wine-lit candles, and set the table for two. The whole apartment smelled like lemongrass and jasmine. For a moment, I imagined his smile when he'd walk in. When William finally came home, the door slammed against the wall. He didn't smile. He tossed his keys on the counter and stared at the plates. "What's this dinner?" I said softly. "I thought we could have a night in." He snorted. "A night in again. Don't you get tired of doing the same thing?" "It's been a long week. I just wanted us to relax." "Relax." He smirked. "You mean sit around like old people?" That one cut deep. I stared at him across the table, candles flickering between us. William, I'm trying. You said you wanted time together. He shrugged, scrolling through his phone. Time together doesn't mean boring nights and homemade food. You never do anything different, Isabella. You're predictable. I swallowed hard. Predictable isn't always bad. He looked up, then his eyes colder than I'd ever seen them. Boring is, though. You're not a real woman if you can't keep things exciting. The sentence landed like a slap. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I'd spent 2 years giving him every piece of my steadiness, every ounce of my effort, and he threw it back at me like it meant nothing. Something inside me went still. I picked up the corkscrew, set it down again, and met his gaze. My voice was calm when I said, "Then maybe you should find a woman who wants the same kind of noise you do." He blinked, surprised by my tone. Maybe he thought I'd cry, beg, or apologize. Instead, I turned away, blowing out the candles one by one. The smell of smoke lingered in the silence between us. He didn't follow me that night. He didn't say another word. And I realized silence can speak louder than anger ever could. The morning after that fight, I woke up before the sun. The apartment was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. William's side of the bed was empty. He hadn't come home. I sat there for a moment, staring at the dent his pillow still made. There was no anger left, just a hollow ache, the kind that settles deep in your chest when you know something's already broken beyond repair. I walked into the kitchen. The dinner from last night still sat on the table untouched. The candles had melted into puddles of wax. I picked up the half-drunk glass of wine he'd left behind and poured it down the sink. Watching it swirl away felt strangely final. By the time William came back that afternoon, I had made a decision. He walked in like nothing happened, hair tousled, smelling faintly of alcohol and perfume. My stomach tightened, but my voice stayed steady. "Rough night?" I asked. "Don't start," he muttered, tossing his jacket on the couch. I didn't. I simply turned, walked into the bedroom, and pulled his suitcase from the closet. He followed me, frowning. "What are you doing?" "Helping you," I said, opening his dresser drawers. "You said you needed more excitement. Maybe this will help." He scoffed, still not believing me. "You're being dramatic." I folded one of his shirts carefully. "No, William, I'm being done." That got his attention. His voice rose defensive, almost panicked. "Come on, Isabella, stop it. You don't mean this." "I do. We just need space. Then take it." He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. For a moment, he just stared, confused, maybe realizing this wasn't one of our usual arguments, that the quiet woman who used to compromise for everything wasn't bending anymore. "You're seriously ending this?" he asked. "You already did. I'm just cleaning up the mess." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "So that's it? You're throwing me out because I said one stupid thing." I looked him straight in the eye. "No, I'm letting you go because you don't respect me, because you think loyalty is boring and kindness is weak, because every time I tried to build something real, you looked over my shoulder at the next shiny distraction." He laughed bitterly. "You'll regret this. Guys like me don't come around twice." I zipped the suitcase slowly. The sound sliced through the air like a closing chapter. "You're right," I said softly. "They don't, and I'll make sure of that." I carried the suitcase to the front door. He didn't move to stop me. Maybe he couldn't believe it. Maybe he thought I'd give in at the last second. When the door shut behind him, the silence that filled the room was heavy but clean. I went back to the kitchen, looked at the table still set for two, and finally sat down. The food was cold, the candles were crooked, but for the first time in months I wasn't waiting for him. The quiet pressed in around me. My throat burned, but no tears came. I had cried enough inside this relationship already. Hours later, my phone buzzed. A message from him. "We both need space. I'll call when things calm down." I stared at it for a long time, then I deleted it. No reply, no anger, just stillness. That night, I cleaned the apartment from top to bottom. I stripped the sheets, threw away his half-empty cologne, and opened every window. The cool night air swept through the rooms, carrying away the last of his scent. For the first time in a long while, I slept deeply. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight spilling across my pillow and realized something unexpected. I didn't feel empty. I felt light. The first week without William was brutal. The apartment felt too big, too quiet. I'd find myself cooking enough food for two or reaching for my phone to text him before remembering he wasn't mine to reach for anymore. But pain has a strange way of stretching time. Days that felt unbearable at first began to soften. Silence, which used to feel like punishment, slowly turned into something sacred. I started with small things. I took long walks after work without checking my phone. I bought fresh flowers and placed them in the kitchen, the same kitchen where he once told me I wasn't a real woman. The irony wasn't lost on me. Every night, I wrote one sentence in a journal, something I'd learned, something I'd survived, something I refused to forget. Day 4. I didn't cry today. Day 6, I cooked dinner for myself and enjoyed it. Day 9, I laughed again. Each page felt like reclaiming a part of myself I hadn't realized I'd given away. By the second week, I decided to make changes. I joined a fitness class, not to get revenge or prove anything, but because I wanted to feel strong again. I spent weekends reorganizing my life, clearing out clutter, updating my resume, even applying for a certification course at work that I'd once put off because William didn't want me too busy. Funny how much space you discover when the wrong person stops filling it. Meanwhile, William's name started appearing in conversations I didn't ask for. Mutual friends mentioned seeing him out, always surrounded by people, always posting pictures like he was living his best life. Clinking glasses, dancing girls, fake smiles. I stayed silent, but inside I knew that kind of happiness was just noise. It fades as quickly as it flashes. And I was learning to love the opposite stillness. One Saturday morning, I woke up early to sunlight filtering through the curtains. I brewed coffee, opened my laptop, and studied for my exam. Hours passed without music, without distractions, just quiet focus. That calm felt more intoxicating than any party ever had. A few weeks later, I passed the certification test. My boss called me into her office and offered me a raise. "You've really grown lately," she said. "There's confidence in you I didn't see before." She had no idea how much that meant. That evening, I cooked myself a celebratory dinner, the same Thai dish I used to buy for William. This time I plated it, beautifully poured a glass of wine, and lit a single candle. Not to impress anyone, just for me. But growth isn't a straight line. Some nights I'd lie in bed and still hear his voice in my head, mocking, laughing, comparing me to women who were more fun. And I'd wonder, was I really that boring? Was I too safe, too serious, too ordinary? Then I'd remember the look on his face when I told him to leave the shock, the loss of control. He wasn't expecting a woman like me to choose peace over passion. Because peace to him was weakness, but to me it was survival. As weeks turned into months, the transformation became visible. I'd lost a bit of weight, but more than that, I'd shed the heaviness that came from being constantly belittled. My friends noticed. "You look different," they said. "Like you're glowing." Maybe I was not from love, but from freedom. Then one night, while scrolling through messages, I saw a name I hadn't seen in months, Lena Williams' ex. She'd posted something on social media that mutual friends kept sharing. It was a vague post, but the comments told the story clearly enough. Apparently, William had gone back to her for a while after our breakup, and now she was warning other women about him, calling him manipulative, selfish, incapable of commitment. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, my heart oddly calm. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. Everything I'd once blamed myself for not being exciting enough, not being wild enough, was never the problem. It was him. It was always him. And as I closed the app, a strange peace washed over me. For the first time, I didn't care where he was or who he was with. Because while William was chasing noise, I had finally found the music in my own silence. It had been almost 3 months since William left. By then, the silence had turned from something I endured into something I depended on. It was peace, fragile but precious. Until the day he broke it. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was on the floor of my living room, painting my toenails, and humming to a song I loved. The air smelled like fresh coffee and lavender. I just cleaned the windows were open, and the sunlight was spilling across the wooden floor. Then came a knock. Firm, familiar. My heart skipped, but my body didn't move. For a moment, I just stared at the door, hoping I was wrong. But the second knock was slower, heavier, like someone testing whether they still belonged. I opened it. William stood there, wearing the same smirk he always wore when he wanted something. Only this time, it didn't reach his eyes. He looked tired. His skin was dull, his hair messy, and the confidence he once flaunted had melted into a quiet desperation. "Isabella," he said softly, like the name itself could undo everything. "William." We stood in silence for a long moment. The smell of cheap cologne and cigarettes clung to him. I could tell he'd been drinking. "You look good," he said finally, eyes flicking around my apartment. "Different." "I am different," I replied. He shifted his weight hands in his pockets. "Can we talk?" "About what?" He hesitated, then sighed. "I messed up, okay? I didn't mean the things I said. I was angry, stupid. You were honest," I said quietly. "There's a difference." He flinched but pressed on. I thought I wanted excitement, but it's all fake. Everyone's fake. You were the only real thing I had. For a second, I almost pitied him. Almost. You told me I wasn't a real woman. I reminded him, my voice calm but cutting. You made me believe that stability wasn't worth anything. That calm meant I was lifeless. He ran a hand through his hair. I didn't mean it like that. I was trying to push you to get us out of the routine. No, I interrupted. You were trying to break something you didn't understand. His expression twisted, part frustration, part shame. Can we just start over? He pleaded. I miss us, Iz. Don't call me that. His lips parted in surprise. I stepped forward, keeping my voice steady. You don't get to come back just because chaos didn't work out for you. You walked away from peace, William. You wanted the noise. I thought I did, he whispered, but all I found was emptiness. For a heartbeat, the air between us was thick with old memories. Laughter, late-night talks, the warmth of love that once felt real. But then I saw the same flicker in his eyes, that restless hunger, always searching for something to fill him up. And I knew he hadn't changed. He just hated being alone. You should go, I said. So that's it. His voice cracked. After everything, you won't even talk to me. There's nothing left to say. He looked around as if expecting the door to open wider. When it didn't, his shoulders dropped. You'll regret this, he muttered almost to himself. No, I said softly. I already regretted staying too long. I closed the door before he could answer. For a moment, I just stood there, my hand on the handle, heart pounding. His scent lingered in the hallway, fading like an echo. Then I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat by the window. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. He'd come back looking for the version of me that used to rescue him, the one who bent until she broke. But that woman was gone. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing against the curtains. I watched a leaf spin wildly, then land softly on the balcony still. And for the first time, I smiled, because that's what I had become, still and finally free. A week later, a mutual friend called me. Did you hear about William? She asked, lowering her voice. He got fired, missed too many shifts. Apparently, he's been struggling. I felt a flicker of something, not joy, not revenge, just a quiet sense of distance. The same way you'd feel hearing about a storm that used to hit your town, but now passes far away. I whispered, I hope he finds peace someday, and meant it. But I also knew he wouldn't find it in me. A full year had passed since I last saw William. 12 quiet, beautiful months that rebuilt me piece by piece. The woman who once cried over a slammed door now started each morning with purpose. I'd earned another promotion, redecorated my apartment, and even started volunteering at a local community center on weekends. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, every inch of it. So when my friend Ava invited me to her milestone birthday party, I hesitated at first. I hadn't been around our old social circle much. Too many shared memories, too many questions I didn't want to answer. But Ava insisted. You should come, Bella. You've been glowing lately. It's time people saw it. So I went. The party was held at a rooftop lounge downtown. Laughter. Warm lights, the buzz of chatter blending with soft music. I arrived in a simple black dress, hair loose, heart steady. I wasn't there to prove anything, just to exist, fully. For the first hour, it was perfect. I laughed with old friends, caught up with colleagues, and even danced a little. Then, as I turned toward the bar, I froze. William was there. He stood near the balcony, drink in hand, talking to someone half-heartedly. When his eyes met mine, his expression faltered. He looked startled, then almost relieved. I felt that old ache, distant but recognizable. It didn't hurt anymore. It just reminded me how far I'd come. He made his way over. People parted instinctively as if sensing tension in the air. Isabella, he said with a faint smile. Wow, you look incredible. Thank you, I said simply. It's been a long time. Yeah, he shifted awkwardly. How have you been? Good, focused, peaceful. That last word made him flinch, maybe because he remembered how much he once despised it. He chuckled nervously. I heard you got promoted. Congratulations. You always were the responsible one. Pays off, I guess. A silence stretched between us. The kind of silence that used to make me anxious, desperate to fill it. Not anymore. Listen, he began, his voice softening. I know I said some awful things before. I was immature, chasing stupid excitement. I didn't realize what I had until I lost it. I studied him, the same charming features, but duller now, weighed down by regret. You once told me I wasn't a real woman because I didn't keep things exciting, I said quietly. He looked down. I know, I was an idiot. You wanted chaos, I continued. I wanted a life. You made your choice. People change, he said quickly, almost pleading. I've changed. I know what matters now. We could try again, start over. Please, Isabella. The music faded in my mind. The world seemed to pause. For a second, I saw flashes of our past, the dinners, the laughter, the way he used to make me feel seen before he learned how to make me feel small. And then I saw the present me standing tall, calm, steady. "No," I said gently. "We can't." He blinked. "Why not?" "Because you don't love peace, William. You just hate being alone." His mouth opened, then shut again. "You think you're too good for me now?" he asked bitterly. I gave a small smile. "No, I think I'm too good for the version of myself who thought love meant proving my worth to you." The words came out soft, but they landed like thunder. He looked away, shoulders slumping, his charm evaporating completely. Without another word, he walked off, swallowed by the crowd and the music. I exhaled slowly, letting the moment dissolve. Ava found me soon after, her hand warm on my arm. "You okay?" she whispered. I smiled, truly smiled. Better than ever. We raised our glasses and I looked out at the skyline, the city lights shimmering like tiny promises. For the first time, I didn't feel like someone's ex or someone's lesson. I felt like my own victory, because I learned that peace isn't boring. It's brave, it's beautiful, and it's the only thing I'll ever choose again. My name's Linda Park. I'm 29, and until a year ago, I thought I understood what just friends meant. Turns out it's the softest lie two people can tell each other before something breaks. Peter and I met 3 years ago through mutual friends at a small rooftop party. I still remember how he made everyone laugh without trying. I was the quiet one then, the one who listened more than I spoke. Somehow he noticed that about me. That night he said, "You look like someone who finds comfort in silence." I didn't know whether to be flattered or terrified that he'd seen me so clearly so fast. We started hanging out at first in groups, then just us. Coffee after work turned into midnight walks, long messages about music, failed relationships, and childhood wounds we pretended not to still carry. He'd tease me for overthinking, and I'd tease him for pretending not to. Somewhere between all those jokes, something unspoken began to hum underneath every conversation. Late-night calls that were supposed to end after one episode of whatever show we were watching stretched into dawn. He'd tell me about his dates, and I'd pretend not to care. I'd tell him about my ex, and he'd pretend to listen while scrolling his phone. Still, when he'd text you up at midnight, I always was. Always waiting for something that never quite arrived. The truth, I was falling in love with my best friend. It didn't happen all at once. It was slow, quiet, like rain soaking into the ground, until one day you realize you're drowning in it. One Friday night, I stopped pretending. Peter had a rough week. His boss yelled at him, his ex had posted something smug on social media, and he came over to vent. We ordered takeout, watched some old movie neither of us really followed. Halfway through, he leaned his head on the couch and sighed. "You're the only person who doesn't make me feel like a failure." I laughed softly. "That's a low bar." He smiled, tired but sincere, and said, "Nah, you're just safe." Something about that word cracked me open and hollowed me out at the same time. Safe. Not special, not loved, just safe. We sat in silence. Then he turned eyes softer than I'd ever seen. It wasn't a dramatic moment. No music, no perfect timing. Just two people breathing the same air, both knowing the truth they'd been avoiding. I didn't overthink it for once. I leaned in slowly, hoping he'd meet me halfway. He didn't. He froze. Then that polite smile, the one people use when they're trying not to hurt you. "Linda," he whispered, "let's not ruin the friendship, okay?" For a second, everything went perfectly still. My pulse, the TV, even the air between us. Ruin. I wanted to laugh, to ask if months of emotional intimacy didn't already blur the lines. But all I managed was a nod. "Yeah, sure. You're right." I grabbed my jacket, forcing a smile that felt like glass breaking. "Good night, Peter." He looked almost disappointed that I didn't argue. "Hey, don't be weird about it." "I'm not," I said quietly. "Just adjusting." That's the thing about quiet heartbreak, it doesn't explode. It just sinks into silence. I walked home through empty streets that smelled like rain, replaying every word. Let's not ruin the friendship. As if friendship hadn't already been ruined the moment one of us started pretending it was enough. My phone buzzed. A text from him. "Don't make this awkward. You know I care about you." I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then I put it face down and whispered to myself, "I know you do, just not enough." That was the night I stopped being his emotional girlfriend and finally became exactly what he asked for, just a friend. He didn't know it yet, but that choice was going to cost him everything. For the first few days after that night, nothing felt different, except everything did. Peter still texted like usual, Memes, half-formed jokes, random, you'd like this links. I still replied just shorter. Polite. Neutral. The kind of tone you use with coworkers, not the person who once knew the rhythm of your heartbeat. He didn't notice at first. That's the thing about people who take your warmth for granted, they only miss it when it's gone. The first weekend after the friendship talk, he called like nothing happened. Coffee. My treat. I owe you for listening to my drama again, he said, laughing like old times. I hesitated, then said yes. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to know if I could see him without falling apart. When I arrived, he was already there, same cafe, same seat by the window, the same easy smile that used to make my stomach flutter. Only this time I didn't feel much of anything. You're late, he teased. I had errands, I replied. No apology, no explanation, just truth. He studied me for a second. You seem different. Maybe I am, I said. Maybe I finally listened to you. He frowned slightly. What's that supposed to mean? I smiled lightly. You said we're better as friends, so I'm being one. He laughed a little awkwardly. Don't be dramatic, Linda. I'm not, I said. I'm just consistent. After that day, I stopped being the first to text, stopped checking his stories, stopped waiting for his name to light up my screen. When he called late at night, I'd let it ring. I told myself it wasn't revenge, it was balance. And slowly it worked. I started sleeping better, eating better. The fog in my chest began to lift. I realized how much of myself I'd spent trying to keep our almost love alive. He noticed the shift eventually. One night he texted, "You okay? You've been distant lately." I stared at it for a moment, then typed back, "Yeah, just been busy. No emoji, no soft landing. Just the truth." He replied with a thumbs up, and for the first time I didn't feel guilty for not giving him more. Weeks passed. He tried to make small talk, sending old inside jokes, a selfie from the cafe where we used to hang out. Miss our caffeine therapy sessions, he wrote. Glad you're getting therapy, I replied. He didn't text back for 2 days. It should have hurt. It didn't, because the silence wasn't a punishment anymore, it was peace. Then came brunch. He suggested we catch up properly, so I agreed. We met at the same spot where he once told me I was safe. I arrived 15 minutes late. No reason, just choice. He looked surprised when I didn't hug him. You're avoiding me, he said, half smiling. I'm here, aren't I? He chuckled, but his eyes were searching mine for something warmth, maybe. It wasn't there. We ordered, talked about work life, everything except what mattered. Then halfway through his omelet, he said, You seem different lately, like colder. I took a sip of my coffee. Maybe I finally realized what I was to you. He blinked. My best friend. I smiled faintly. Exactly. When we stood up to leave, he hugged me longer than usual. I let him. My arms stayed still at my sides. He pulled back, frowning. You're really not going to say anything. What's there to say, Peter? I asked gently. You wanted friendship. This is it. His lips parted, but no words came. For the first time since we met, he looked unsure, like he was standing at the edge of something he couldn't control. As I walked away, I felt something new. Not anger, not heartbreak. Just clarity. That night, I deleted our old photos from my phone. Not out of spite, but because I no longer needed proof that we were once close. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for someone who doesn't choose you is stop choosing them too. When I looked in the mirror before bed, I barely recognized myself. Not because I'd changed overnight, but because I'd finally stopped shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. And somewhere in the distance, I knew the moment he realized I'd really let go, he'd start to chase. It began quietly, the kind of shift you only notice when the air between two people changes temperature. Peter, the man who once told me not to ruin the friendship, suddenly seemed intent on keeping it alive. He started sending more texts. Hey, remember this place? You'd laugh at what my coworker said today. Can we talk, just catching up? At first I thought it was guilt. Then I realized it was fear. The kind people feel when they sense you've finally stopped orbiting them. By the time spring rolled around, I'd rebuilt pieces of my life he'd quietly taken space in. I joined a book club, started running again, and most surprisingly began to enjoy my job. That's also when Troy came along. He was a new hire in marketing, confident but kind, the type who didn't need to fill every silence. We became friends quickly, the way you do when someone sees you as you are, not as who you used to be for someone else. Peter didn't take it well. The first time he saw me post a group photo, Troy standing beside me smiling, he commented, "New circle, huh?" I replied with a thumbs up emoji. He sent another message, "You've changed." "Yeah," I typed back. "That's what time does." No emoji this time either. A week later, he coincidentally stopped by the cafe near my office, the one he'd never liked before. "Oh, wow, you work around here?" he asked, feigning surprise. "I've worked here for 2 years," I said flatly. He chuckled. "Guess I just forgot." That word forgot made something twist in me. Funny how people only forget what didn't serve them. We sat for a few minutes pretending it wasn't strange. He kept glancing at my phone when it buzzed. I didn't hide it. I wanted him to see Troy's name light up my screen. "New friend?" he asked. I smiled. "Yeah, he actually listens when I talk." His jaw tensed just slightly, enough for me to notice. Over the next few weeks, Peter's tone shifted from casual to needy. "You up miss our late night talks? I just can't sleep lately. Everything feels off." At first, I ignored them. I wasn't being cruel. I was just done performing patience for someone who'd never earned it. Then came the calls. One night, 3 in a row. I finally answered, half out of concern, half out of exhaustion. "Everything okay?" I asked. He hesitated. "Yeah, just couldn't sleep." "Then maybe you should try," I said softly. There was a pause, long trembling. "You don't care anymore, do you?" he whispered. I could have lied. I used to. But this time I said, "Not the way I used to." Silence again. Then he hung up. That was the first crack in his calm. After that, he started appearing in places I didn't expect: my gym, a bookstore he'd once mocked, even a mutual friend's birthday dinner he'd skipped last year. Every time he'd act surprised to see me. Every time I'd act like I believed him. But there was something raw in his eyes. The realization that I was slipping from the role he'd cast me in the dependable, waiting, ever-patient friend. One night I got a message that made me laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so familiar. "You've been on my mind lately. I miss how things were." I didn't respond. I didn't even open it. Because here's the truth. Once you stop chasing someone who feeds on your presence, they either lose interest or lose their balance. Peter wasn't ready to lose either. And the more I stood still, the more desperate he became. The next time he saw me, it was by accident, or maybe not. I was leaving the office with Troy, both of us laughing about something trivial. Peter was waiting by his car across the street. He didn't wave, just watched. That night I got another text. "Who's Troy?" I stared at the screen for a while, then replied, "A friend, just asking. You two seem close." "We are." That was it. No apology, no softness. And I think that's when it finally hit him I wasn't orbiting him anymore. He was the one standing still now, watching me move. It happened one Thursday night. The sky was bruised with storm clouds, and I was halfway through making dinner when my phone buzzed again and again. Peter. 11 missed calls, then a message. "Please, can we talk just 5 minutes? I'm outside." For a second, I froze. The version of me from months ago would have dropped everything, but I wasn't her anymore. Still curiosity, or maybe closure, pulled me to the door. He was leaning against his car, rain dripping from his hair, the same sheepish smile he always used when he wanted forgiveness before even asking for it. "Linda," he said softly. "You weren't answering." "I was busy," I replied. He shifted, looking at me like I was the one who'd changed languages on him. "You're different lately. I've heard that before." We ended up talking in his car, windows fogged, wipers swiping away the tension that had built for months. He started slow, the way people do when they're rehearsing guilt. "I know I hurt you," he said. I didn't mean to. I thought I needed space." I stayed quiet. He kept going. "You were always the safe one. I guess I wanted excitement, something new. But it wasn't what I thought." "Didn't go well?" I asked quietly. He gave a short, bitter laugh. "She wasn't you." Those words used to be my fantasy. Now they just sounded small. I looked at him and saw a man who only realized my worth when it stopped orbiting around him. "Peter," I said carefully, "you told me to be your friend. This is what friendship looks like." He flinched a little. "You don't have to be so cold." "I'm not cold," I said. "I'm consistent. You just don't like what it feels like when it's not all about you anymore." He stared at me, eyes glassy. "You always treated me like I mattered," he whispered. "And you taught me what happens when someone doesn't," I replied. A car passed its headlights, slicing through the rain. For a second, his face looked younger, scared almost. "Do you ever think we could go back?" he asked. "No," I said simply, because I finally moved forward. The silence that followed was heavy but clean. He exhaled, shaky, like he'd been holding his breath for months. You've changed, he said again, almost to himself. That's what healing looks like, I told him. He nodded, but his smile faltered. I miss how you used to look at me. I met his gaze. You can't miss something you threw away. He winced, not angry, just hurt in the way people are when truth lands too close. When I stepped out of the car, the rain had turned soft. He called after me. Linda? I turned. I'm sorry, he said, voice breaking. For everything. I nodded. I believe you. But that apology's for you, not for me. He blinked. What do you mean, you're saying sorry to feel lighter? I said. I already let it go. I watched realization flicker across his face, the shock of someone who expected to be forgiven and missed. But I wasn't carrying that weight anymore. That night I sat on my balcony, the city buzzing, below the storm, now just a drizzle. I thought about how love can decay so quietly it becomes memory before you even know it's dying. Peter thought regret was a key that could unlock what he'd closed, but regret only unlocks understanding, not second chances. I looked up at the clouds parting above the city and smiled. For the first time in years, I felt free, not from him, but from needing to be chosen by him. It didn't take long for Peter's regret to shift into something else performance. A week after that night, I started hearing from mutual friends. Hey, did you see Peter's post? I hadn't, but they showed me anyway. A black and white selfie. The caption read, "Some people change so much you wonder if they ever cared at all." I almost laughed. The irony was too sharp. The same man who once called me safe was now painting himself as the broken-hearted victim. I didn't comment, didn't text, didn't feed it. Silence has a way of starving ego faster than anger ever could. Meanwhile, life started to feel quiet in the right ways. Mornings were lighter. The space in my head that used to be filled with what if finally felt clean. Troy and I began spending more time together, slow, easy, natural. He'd walk me to my car after work, never rushing, never filling silences with empty words. Once when I told him I was trying to unlearn my habit of fixing people, he said, "Good. Let them fix themselves for once." It wasn't romantic then, but it was the kind of kindness that builds a foundation before the fire ever starts. Peter didn't vanish, though. He hovered, liking old posts, replying to my stories with vague comments like, "You look happy lately." At first, I ignored them. Then one day, curiosity won. I opened his profile. Inspirational quotes, gym selfies, one photo with a girl whose smile looked nervous. The caption, "New Beginnings." I didn't roll my eyes. I just closed the app. That's when I realized the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. A month later, he texted again. "Can we talk?" "I think I owe you an explanation." "You already gave it," I replied. "Not properly. I miss us. You miss control." I typed back, then deleted it. Instead, I left him on read. That night, he called. I didn't answer. He left a voice note, his voice low, trembling, just drunk enough to be honest. "I hate that you don't chase me anymore." The next morning, he followed it up with, "Ignore that. I was just emotional." I did. And then came the message that told me everything I needed to know. "You think you're better than me now, don't you?" I stared at it stunned, not because it was cruel, but because it was finally honest. For the first time, he'd said what his pride had been screaming all along. I typed back, "No, Peter. I just stopped letting you define my worth." He didn't reply. That night, I sat in my apartment lights, low laptop open, half working, but mostly thinking. Every story has a moment when the villain realizes they're not the main character anymore. That was his moment. I thought back to all the nights I'd begged the universe for closure and realized I'd already lived it. Closure isn't a conversation. It's the day you stop needing one. Weeks turned into months. My world kept expanding, dinners with new friends. Weekend road trips, spontaneous laughter that didn't feel borrowed from someone else's approval. Troy and I grew closer gently, the way two people do when neither of them is trying to prove anything. He asked me once, "Do you ever think about him?" "Not really," I said truthfully. "Sometimes I just remember who I was around him." He nodded, and I'm glad she's gone. But Peter wasn't ready to disappear from the story just yet. Because when someone used to being adored suddenly loses control of the narrative, they'll do anything to rewrite it. He started showing up at mutual events again, dinners, birthdays, even a friend's engagement party. He'd linger too close, start conversations that sounded casual but felt loaded. At one of them, he said quietly, "You seem happy with him." I looked at him calm, steady. "I am." He smiled, but his eyes betrayed something darker envy dressed as nostalgia. Later that night, he texted again. "You've really changed." "That's what moving on looks like," I wrote back. "It hurts. Healing usually does." That was the last time I entertained his messages, because by then I'd realized something powerful. The people who break you will often come back just to check if the damage still belongs to them, and the greatest revenge is when they find nothing left to hold on to. When Peter said once, "You used to love me," I smiled. "I did," I said softly. "But that version of me doesn't exist anymore." 6 months later, life had a rhythm again. Mornings began with quiet coffee and sunlight on the kitchen floor. My laughter wasn't something I had to rehearse anymore, it just existed. Troy and I had become something real. Not the kind of love that burns everything down, but the kind that builds something worth standing in. Steady, warm, honest. He never made me guess what I meant to him, and that alone felt like luxury. So when a mutual friend's wedding invitation came in the mail, the one I knew Peter would also attend, I didn't hesitate, because I wasn't afraid anymore. The ballroom was glowing that night. Chandeliers, laughter, soft music curling through the air. Troy's hand fit naturally in mine as we entered. And then I saw him, Peter. He was by the bar, drink in hand, hair shorter, smile tighter. When our eyes met, he froze, the brief flicker of someone realizing too late that time had actually moved without them. He walked over slowly. "Linda," he said, voice steady but thin. "Didn't think you'd come." "I almost didn't," I said, smiling politely, "but I'm glad I did." His eyes darted to Troy, who was talking to a friend nearby. "So, that's him." "Yeah," I said simply. "That's Troy." He nodded, swallowing hard. "He seems nice." "He is." There was silence, not awkward, just heavy, the kind filled with everything that would never need to be said again. "You look happy," Peter said finally. "I am. You really moved on, huh?" "Yes." He gave a shaky laugh, trying to sound casual. You seem different." "More peaceful," I offered. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, that." I smiled faintly. Turns out peace looks a lot like letting go. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to say something more, to reach out to ask for another chance. But he didn't. Maybe he finally understood. Later in the evening, he found me again, this time alone near the buffet table. He hesitated, then said, "You know, I used to think you were too serious, too careful." I raised an eyebrow. "You told me that more than once." He smiled, eyes distant. "Guess I was wrong. You were just protecting your heart. I didn't get that back then. You weren't supposed to," I said quietly. "You weren't meant to keep it." He looked down, tracing the rim of his glass. "I thought I wanted passion, but maybe I just wanted attention." I tilted my head. "You always did. The problem was you didn't know the difference." He flinched, but nodded. "I hate how much that hurts." "It only hurts because you finally understand it's real," I said gently. When the music changed to something slow, Troy came over and reached for my hand. As he led me to the dance floor, Peter stepped back, giving a small, sad smile. "She's lucky, you know," he said quietly. I looked at him. "No," I said. "We're lucky. We both chose better." Then I walked away. As Troy's arm slid around my waist, I felt the world fade into the rhythm of the song. He whispered, "Was that weird for you?" "Not really," I said. "It was just a reminder of how far I've come." He smiled and kissed my forehead. "She didn't know what she lost, did she?" "She never did," I replied. Across the room, Peter stood alone at the edge of the dance floor. The same place where we used to laugh, the same place where I once mistook comfort for connection. Only now the music wasn't ours anymore. I rested my head on Troy's shoulder and closed my eyes. The girl who once waited for Peter's text was gone. The woman in her place didn't chase love anymore. She built it quietly and deliberately with someone who stayed. Because that's the real victory, not revenge, not regret, just peace. Peace doesn't need witnesses, it just needs you to stop explaining.